I would fight now if somebody came and offered me $300.5 million to get in a fight, even at my age, because it's fun and I'm getting paid to do it. I refuse to allow that to be an obstacle that would stop me from doing what I wanted to do. And in my mind, I felt like if it was going to kill me, then so be it. If it was going to paralyze me, then so be it. But I'm going to live my life the way I want to live it. I'm not, and it wasn't like I'm doing it to where I was going to go out and shoot anybody or go do drugs or do things that was going to harm me and other people. I did it because I felt like that's who I was and that's my DNA.
Cheers for coming on, Ken. Anyways, thanks for your time. You're a legend over in the UK.
Well, thank you, man. Appreciate it.
And it's weird because I knew you from wrestling and the UFC days and things. But when I started doing a bit of research, I couldn't believe your childhood. Was it true when you were young? Did you get stabbed as a young lad?
Yeah. I was 10 years old, actually, behind a 7-Eleven store down in Napa, California, by a school called Pueblo Vista. And I was obviously not in school because I wasn't doing the things I was supposed to be doing, hanging out with the wrong crowd. Got into a scuffle with a bunch of kids and ended up getting stabbed with a lock blade stuck in my arm.
Right. Because I was reading stuff like that, and I just think, like, I didn't realise how tough of a childhood you had because you were bouncing between like child homes. I think they're called child homes there. We call them orphanages in the UK, child homes. How tough was that as a young lad growing up?
Yeah, people say, how tough is that? And when you're going from group home to group home, I wouldn't call it tough, like a tough living or anything like that, because you got a roof over your head, you got food, the state is taking care of you. It's not comfortable. It's not, there's no love, there's no caring, you're basically just a number. So there's that, right? It's not a good thing. But when people say it's a horrible upbringing, I think about more of the times when I was living out of a car or I was on the streets, trying to raise myself at a young age. That's rough. That's rough.
And was it your first role model at the Shamrock home? Is that the first guy that sort of showed you a bit of a love and sort of affection sort of thing? Yeah,
again, like kind of just the way that things had transpired when I was younger, I didn't have an understanding of what a family was supposed to be like, or what it was to be loved or cared for, or what a young boy was supposed to be doing. And so it was all just kind of the only way that I would make things happen around my other brothers, where we were basically raising ourselves and at a very young age. And, so we were just basically, if you would have just let a dog raise itself, anytime something comes around them, they're going to bite them because it's not something they're used to, or because they're angry. And that's kind of the way we were when we were being raised up as young kids. We weren't really raised up. So anybody that came around, we bite them. So it was pretty rough, But again, Bob Shamrock, when he came into my life after being placed in a bunch of different homes, he proved himself through his actions, because when you're a kid like we were and the way we grew up, we didn't care what you said because we heard it all. We don't care what you do because we've seen it all. And we pretty much don't care about anything because we don't care about ourselves, right? We just never knew how or understood what it is to care for anything. So for him to be able to show that, by responding in ways of teaching us how to vent frustration and anger into something positive, caring about what we have done and what we've done, and taking an active role into helping us change and explaining to us how he was going to do that, and not just talk about, doing your chores and behaving and then you can go home. It was more about him dealing with these kids and why are they in placement? Why are they having problems? What are their issues? How do we fix them? So, when you're a kid like that, you definitely know when someone's legit, or that is somebody that truly does want to help. You you can definitely, sniff out the fakes and the ones that are real.
I think that's important for a lot of kids growing up, though, isn't it? Because some kids just aren't academic, but ones are really good at sport, and having the right mentor, parents, things like that to push you down the sport route can change a person's life. Like yourself, you without maybe wrestling and football, you wouldn't know what path you'd go down.
No, I knew what path I would go down. If I didn't have a place to vent my frustration and anger, it would be doing what I was doing. And I would, just like people were always telling me, you're going to end up dead or in prison. And that's where I would have been. There's no question. You can't change the wheel. When kids act like that, they keep doing those same things, they end up dead or in prison. It's just the way it is. There's no magic to it, right? That's what's going to happen. Fortunately for me, I was able to find somebody to help me take that anger and frustration and turn it into something positive. And then, of course, when I found that, obviously I didn't know that, at the time. But when I started feeling good about being relevant because I was good at something, that changed me. That literally gave me something to live for, something to want to change for, something to want to get good grades for. Because if I couldn't play sports, then I was sad. I didn't want that. So that was something that could be taken away from me if I didn't get a C in every class, or if I didn't go and do my homework, or I didn't behave. There was something there that he knew that he could take away for a weekend or for a practice that he knew I wanted to do. And it hurt. And so it made me want to keep doing what I needed to do to keep doing those things. It's like taking the keys away from a teenager when they get their car. These are tools that you're able to use to help kids understand that this is the way life works. When you don't work hard for something, you can't have it.
Were you naturally good at sport? As soon as you got into it, were you good at wrestling, American football? Was that just something, as soon as you took to it, just a natural athlete, or did it take a bit of time working at it?
No, the minute I stepped on the football field, they put me in linebacker. Then they said, because I didn't have the discipline to not jump and hit people when they would say hut, because I was too close to the line of scrimmage, and it was easy to get me to jump because I was so tense and hyper. So they moved me back to cornerback. And of course, then I was just hitting running backs that were coming through the hole, and I was hitting receivers and, just lighting people up because I had plenty of space to be able to see what was happening. Eventually, after halfway through the season, they moved me to linebacker because I was too aggressive at cornerback. I hit guys too early sometimes, and at linebacker, once I kind of got the idea of the snap counts and, the patience and the blitzes and stuff like that, I was able to just cut it loose and be good at it. So for me, it was one of those times where I said, okay, I can do this. And not only can I do it, but the rest of the people appreciate what I'm doing, as opposed to whenever I got in this mood and wanted to hit somebody and hurt somebody, all those same people were saying, put them in prison, throw the key away.
Yeah, and then did you get a bad injury when you were playing football as well? Because you read these things online, you don't know what's true, what isn't. And did you break your neck, or is that just something that didn't happen, or I've read it wrong online?
No, actually, I had actually broke it twice. One time I broke it in high school, which was a severe break. I was 17, and I'd been wrestling, and I was qualifying for state. I was undefeated that year, and went into practice and hit a move. Guy fell on me and just broke my neck. I was on the ground and I couldn't move. They came in and clamped me up, and it's called this, I think it was a Star Wars board, where they clamp you and they clamp you down, lift you and take you away. 2 hours away, because I was in Susanville, California, and they took me to Redding, California, which was 2 hours away, to a hospital. And from then was where I found out I broke my neck and that they were going to have to do surgery, and basically told me that my contact sports were over. Obviously, those things changed as time went on because, think about this. Me as a kid, who everything that I've ever done has been sports related. That's what has made my life relevant. And everything that I do pertains to me being able to play sports. And so now I've been told that I can't play sports, that's not going to happen anymore. And I was depressed. And I remember my dad told me, listen, you can lay there in powder, you get up, do something about it. And I'm in the hospital. I just broke my neck. Just been told, the doctor says I'm not going to play contact sports again. And most people probably would have, what are you talking about? I'm the one here. No, I took it as like, he's right. You know what I mean? Of course, I took it different than what he was meaning it, but nevertheless, it worked out because I thought to myself, he's right. Who's this doctor to tell me what I can do, what I can and can't do? Because he doesn't know what I'm willing to do to get to where it is I want to go. And so I thought to myself, okay, this is not over. And so I remember going out after I broke my neck. I tore the bolts out in my head one time because I was in this halo with the chase plate on and bolts in my head. And I tore it out, got into a fight and tore the bolts out. Another time I tore it out playing basketball with this halo on. And anybody that knows what I'm talking about with a halo, they'd be going, basketball. But the mentality that I had was, I never really knew the severity of it. Like, I didn't understand the severity. I guess I wouldn't allow myself to, because if I did, then it would allow myself to know that I wasn't going to play contact sports again. If I would have taken it for what the value was and what the reality was. But I just didn't. And so even through those different things that I did, where I tore the bolts out, had to go back and get them placed, and the fragments in my head, all the things. And I remember when I got it off the very first day, and I ain't kidding you, because if anybody knows about that thing, your balance is off because your head has been strapped down and your muscles are weak. And the next day I ran 3 miles after I just got it off. And so I refused to allow that to be an obstacle that would stop me from doing what I wanted to do. And in my mind, I felt like if it was going to kill me, then so be it. If it was going to paralyze me, then so be it. But I'm going to live my life the way I want to live it. I'm not, and it wasn't like I'm doing it to where I was going to go out and shoot anybody or go do drugs or do things that was going to harm me and other people. I did it because I felt like that's who I was and that's my DNA. And that if I can't have that, it'd be like a horse with a broken leg, put a bullet in him. And that's the kind of the way I felt when I was told I couldn't play sports. I said, well, just put a bullet in me. I mean, and my mentality going forward was the same way. It was like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to live my life and challenge myself to get where I want to be, no matter what anybody else says.
Did you have to get signed off to carry on playing sports? Because I can imagine, like, the doctors, did you have to go to a doctor and say, can you sign me off? Or because I imagine schools and clubs and things, they're always dead funny, aren't they, with safety? I just wondered, obviously in this country they are, I don't know what they are in America. Did you have to get signed off to carry on playing?
Yeah, that's you asked that question. It's funny too, because I had scholarships, right? And of course, the minute I broke my neck, it was like I had the plague. I mean, nobody contacted me. Nobody said sorry. Nobody said, oh, too bad. Contact us when you get better. Or nothing, right? Not a get well card, just zero, cold. And prior to that, I had opportunities. And so going into colleges, junior colleges, because there's no way I could get into university. None of them would touch me. And of course, the place I went to, which is in Redding, California, is where I had the surgery done. There's a college out there, it's Shasta College. And there was a guy out there who was a head coach who played in the NFL, was an offensive lineman. And I remember talking to him and telling him, it's my body. Why can't I be able to go out and risk whatever I want to risk it? Because if I don't, my mentality is I won't be happy anyways. And so he just said, listen, you get a clearance from the doctor, I'll give you a shot. So I went to the doctor, and it wasn't easy, but I ended up getting a clearance letter saying that, obviously the medical has suggested that I don't do this because it is very high risk of injury. But if he wants to play, I will sign him off. I mean, that's unheard of, right? Today, there's never get away with that. But back then, I got the letter, took it to the thing. And of course, then I had to sign all these release forms at the college if I was to play, that they weren't responsible, not even for a broken leg, anything, right? I mean, it was literally, I had to just say, I just want to do it, and I'm not holding you guys responsible for this. And I got the opportunity. They gave it to me. First year I redshirted, and I just played on kickoffs. so that they could kind of see where I was at. Second and third year, I was All-American. I was starting a defensive end. I led the team in tackles. And then when I finished in 3 years, obviously my first redshirt in my third year, I went to go try to get into the NFL, and I had a tryout with the Chargers. Could have played with the Chargers. And I got a letter of a tryout to go play with them. And of course, at the same time is when I got the opportunity to go do pro wrestling in Mooresville, North Carolina. And I felt like at that time with the neck injury and the wrestling and all that, I felt like I had a better opportunity as an individual as opposed to a team to be able to go out there and achieve more on my own merit rather than go out and play football and hopefully I'll get on a team to where they'll actually represent my talent or allow me to be where I want to be. There's too many decisions to be made in sports, and everybody's so close. So if you get a great offensive line, what's to say that you're the guy that's going to start? Because if you got a couple guys that are all similar and close, it's really a character issue. Who do they like better? So I chose to go into an individual sport to where I felt like it was all on me to make it. And I'm glad I did it because I think in the NFL and playing where they pushed me, where they put me at was fullback. I would have been doing a lot of those inside handoffs, the 1 hole, the 0 hole, the 3 hole, with everybody knowing you're getting the ball. And I don't know if my career would have lasted that long. So I'm glad that I went the direction I did with wrestling. And then, of course, from there, I went into the mixed martial arts.
Did it ever play in your mind when you were doing wrestling and making football when you done your neck? Because any time I've been injured, like I've snapped my cruciate leg, your teeth, I've had teeth knocked out in the first couple of games back, you're a little bit tentative, like, oh God, I don't want to get that. Because in your mind you think, I don't want that to happen again. Or you just so headstrong, you just switched off.
Yeah, I think that's one thing my dad told me is he said that, he's never quite seen anybody like me when it comes to my determination. In fact, when I went to wrestling or when I started doing MMA, I never mentioned I broke my neck because I forgot about it. I literally just forgot about it until we started doing stories on me and how I was brought up after I started getting famous. Then there were stories on where I came from, what you do. And then I mentioned one time, I broke my neck. Not a big deal. And they were like, what? I said, man, I broke my neck. And they're like, you broke your neck. And then all of a sudden it became the story, and that was way back when I first started fighting. And of course it's carried with me since. Like people go, oh shit, dude, you broke his neck. So
well, that's why I asked.
I did it again in 2011. Wasn't as bad, but because of the bone spurs and the different things that were going on in there, and there's a fracture in there from all the wear and tear on it, and the spurs were starting to grow into my spinal cord, and I had that degeneration in one of my arms, in my chest, I think it was my left side, because of the spurs that were actually starting to grow into my spinal cord. So I had to go in and have surgery to have that all shaved off and then fix the areas where it was starting to break apart. I got metal brackets in there now. In my lower back, I broke my lower back too. I've got 1 through 3 in my lower back that are brackets, and I'm doing pro wrestling. And it's like this, man. I think if you look at me, I think that my competitiveness is right there with the top guys, and even through all the stuff that I've been through.
Well, when you were injured and you were going into the MMA and things like that, at the time, did you think you could make a career out of it? Because UFC wasn't what it is now, and Japan was probably the biggest scene. Did you think I could make this into a job at that time, or were you just doing it because you enjoyed it?
No, I mean, our thought process wasn't about a career. It was more about doing something I love doing. This was fighting, getting arrested for it, and now they're going to give me money for it. So it's like, yeah, let's do it. I mean, I like it, I've done it my whole life. So now you're going to pay me for it. It was like, yeah, let's do this. And so for me, it was exciting. It was like, I just couldn't believe they were actually doing it. When the first UFC, I couldn't believe it up until Gerard Godot kicked Emmanuel Tua in the face. I literally didn't believe that they were going to be able to do that. And, so it was an exciting ride to be able to go to Japan and be able to do the mixed martial arts when I first saw the videotapes and stuff. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. I want to do that. Then being able to go and do it, and then seeing UFC come in where it's basically a street fight where they're like, yeah, just go in, anything goes, no rules. And you're like, okay, cool. Although there were rules, where there's supposed to be no rules, but they put rules in. But it was still the adrenaline and the excitement of that to actually see a street fight in a ring with a referee when there's supposed to be no rules was just and in a cage, which was absolutely bizarre.
Was there any nerves whatsoever going into something like that? Because I watched them old videos, and you've got sumo wrestlers against karate guys, and I couldn't imagine being in the change room thinking, I don't know who I'm fighting. The rules are all brand new. Was there no nerves whatsoever? Because on the videos, when you're walking towards the ring, you look calm, cool, collected, a bit like Mike Tyson-esque. You look like you could beat people before you get in the ring. I just wondered, was there slight nerves back in the day?
Not at all, man. I mean, for me, I was excited. I mean, it was like a kid going into a candy shop. I mean, especially the way I grew up where you were getting jumped and stabbed and shot. I mean, it was all that tension, right? But walking into a ring, it's one-on-one. I mean, like, this was like, I couldn't believe what was happening. And so I was excited, man. And I knew my abilities, I mean, I've gone against some pretty big dudes in street fights. And I'm just able to outlast them, and I got a good chin, And so I felt like they can't beat me. I had experience in Japan, I mean, I was over there for 2.5 years. And what I learned in 2.5 years is what most people would learn in a lifetime. So I felt very confident going in there and fighting and was excited, And then, of course, you ran into a guy like Royce Gracie, who was, we were the two smallest guys in the tournament, right? And
yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to beat everybody. And then there's a guy running around in pajamas, and I'm like, I'm going to crush him. And so we didn't know who we were fighting, what their skill sets were, how good they were. But in my mind, I was like, there's no way, man, I'm winning this.
Well, like people looking in back in the day, like in the early 80s and 90s and things like that, you had people who thought they were ninjas. And I think when UFC came along, it was like, no, that's the hardest guy on the planet. That's the most dangerous guy on the planet. But before then, you had like, oh, that guy, that master, kung fu master over there might be the hardest. And I think it answered a lot of questions, didn't it, when MMA come around?
Oh, for sure. When you got a guy like Royce Gracie that goes into the tournament, and even though the experience that I had was nothing compared to his, I mean, this guy, you look at him, man, he dominated 4 or 5 tournaments he won. I mean, it was amazing what he was able to do. And at his weight, I think I was 15 pounds heavier than him. But with 2 smallest guys, myself and him, dominated the UFC. And it has to do with skills. Obviously being tough too. I mean, you got to have some mental toughness. And so for me, you look at it and it wasn't all these karate guys and it wasn't all these, tough boxers and kickboxers. It was the guys that knew how to put a guy on the ground and submit him. And of course, then that really turned the world upside down because everybody for the longest time thought it was Bruce Lee, and the kicks and stuff. But you can't do those if you're afraid you're going to be taken down, right? You can't throw those if you can't defend a takedown because then when you get put on your back, it's over. So it did. It turned the world's head upside down. I mean, people were standing on their heads trying to figure out, wait a minute, how does that can't be that's the toughest thing in the world is grappling. And then, of course, we started seeing transitions of strikers like Maurice Smith, be able to defend takedowns and then be able to start knocking grapplers out and winning because their strikings were so much better than the grapplers because they relied on taking guys down. And then once the strikers learned how to defend the takedown, then they were starting to win. Of course, then that forced the grapplers to go, wait a minute, I guess I better learn how to strike. And now that's what we have today.
Well, you were one of the first people to create the Lion's Den where you had everything under one roof. Because before that, you had like the boxing gym, you had the wrestling gym, the jiu-jitsu ones. You brought it all. You were sort of a visionary that way. What made you think that? Did you think, it'd be easy if it was all under one roof, or is it just someone told you to do it?
No, when I was in Japan, working out with Funaki and a bunch of them, that was the motto because they had rope escapes. And so if a guy was to get taken down, he could grab the rope 5 times and then stand back up. So it allowed guys to be able to have more chances to strike. So you have to learn how to strike, because that's a lot of time during a fight for someone to be on their feet. And if you're not very good at it, they're going to catch you, whether it's a kick, a knee, or a punch, and they're going to time your shot. And so it forced you to learn to strike. So I took Muay Thai because that was more close quarters with the kicks, elbows, even the clinches where they're throwing elbows or knees in the clinch. I felt like that was a great style for grappling. And so I studied it, even had a professional fight against an ex-world champion. So that I pushed myself to be a better striker. And this is all before the UFC. So I learned early on, before the UFC ever started, that you had to be well-rounded in both. And obviously you can have a favorite. And mine was definitely taking the risk out of it, which was getting a lucky punch. So you can't get a lucky submission. You can't fall into a submission. So I went the way of the less chance of being, somebody catching a win. So I would take guys down because it was less risky. Not that I couldn't stand and strike, because I could. It was just taking the risk out of it and taking guys to the ground and finishing them. But as things started to develop, you started seeing me being more of a stand-up fighter instead of spending so much energy trying to take guys down. And a lot of that, too, added to with the injuries to my knee, where I wasn't able to move as well from the ground to the stand-up, which is either takedowns or the scrambles from your feet to the ground to your feet.
I can remember the legendary fight with Baz Rutten back in the day. When you're fighting someone like that, because he's a dangerous guy, isn't he, Baz Rutten? You look at them old videos, it looks like he's just knocking people out with a backhand and things like that. Was that a fight you were like nervous for, or did you think, I've got the take on the Baz? Obviously you beat him, but beforehand?
Yeah, I don't think there was any. The only time I ever got nervous about fights is when I got later in my career and I had injuries. My takedowns weren't good. I wasn't scrambling well because of the knee. So going into fights, I wasn't able to train as hard as I used to because my conditioning was always good. I could outlast anybody. But as I got those injuries, I wasn't able to train as hard as I was used to doing. And so I would go into fights not completely prepared to fight a long fight. And so it would start to creep in, knowing I didn't do the work I needed to if this thing got deep into a fight. And I would start thinking about that, and then that would throw me off. And so, but as far as me, when I was fighting and everything was going, without the injuries and stuff like that, I was never, ever nervous, never nervous. I was excited. I couldn't wait to get into the ring. You could see it in my attitude, where I was coming through my skin, wanted to get across the ring at the guy. It was always exciting for me. And even when I was nervous, when I got later in my career, because of some of the injuries and stuff that I had, and I wasn't, even though I was fighting out that, it was still there, the thought of me not being ready, but yet I would fight that away, and I would still have the intensity to go in there and do it. But it was enjoyable, man. I never ever go into a fight not wanting to fight. I've always enjoyed it.
And how did the WWE come around? Was that a financial thing? Because it's WWF then. That was huge, wasn't it? That's where I first seen you. You were on the WWF. I thought, who the hell's this guy? Because you obviously could fight properly. How did that come about? Was it just a financial thing, or did you just always fancy having a go at wrestling?
No, actually, it was financial. I had gotten into the UFC and the Pancras organization, and everything was going good for a while. Then the Pancras organization wanted me to stop fighting in the UFC after I had beat up Hoist. They wanted me to spend more time fighting in Japan, and I felt like that I wanted to go in this direction. I felt like it was a step that in another direction that I wanted to go, but I wanted to do both. But there was some conflicts with Pancras and myself on some of the fights and when they wanted me to fight. And so it just got to a point to where, it felt like they were always angry at me because I was paying more attention in the UFC, it was true because I lived here, everything was going on here. But yet I was still trying to honor them, and still go and do what I need to do for them. But it was tough. And so we had to part ways. You know, they ended up cutting my contract, and I ended up, you know, it was fine. All my guys that were fighting there, I said, they were all like, thought they were going to have to quit. I said, no. I said, you guys keep doing it. I said, you know, because they were still in my gym, still training there. It was still my gym. And I went into pro wrestling because when I went into the UFC, we were starting to fight there. Everything was going well. I ended up stepping away from the pancreas and going full-time in the UFC. I got a good contract there. Then my contract was coming up, but during that time is when we were constantly, like one time we had to pick up from I believe it was Carolina, and we had to move to Dothan, Alabama overnight, 24 hours, and set up and put a show on because somebody had come in and started to complain about fighting there and how the sanctions wasn't going to allow it. And so even though they said it was okay, 24 hours before the event, they had to pick up and move it. And so there was all these battles going on in every state that the UFC went to, fighting to get the show put on, because once they would say yes, then you would have all these people, these lobbyists, or these politicians would come out of the woodworks trying to get their name in the press by fighting this evil company coming in to put evil show on in our neighborhood, and I'm going to protect our community. And so these guys would come out of the woodworks, and of course UFC has us to spend money on attorneys to fight them off. And it felt like all their money was going towards legal fees, like they were trying to keep this thing running, and they were always fighting battles in every state they went to. And then when it came time for my contract to come up, they weren't able to pay me what I needed. And remember, I had 3 different gyms. I had a kickboxing gym, I had a powerlifting gym, a strength and conditioning gym, and then I had a grappling gym. And these were all 3 buildings that were connected, but they were 3 separate bills. Then I had a group home for kids where I had 7 boys there that we were taking care of, at-risk kids that we were taking care of. And then, of course, we had fighters where I had 10 fighters in the house. And I paid for the rent, I paid for the food, I paid for everything for those guys to be there and train. Then I had to pay for trainers that were in that gym when I wasn't there. And so now I had my own home that I had to pay for. So I had a pretty big bill each month, and I was able to put myself in a position to have a business like that, be able to pay those bills, and be able to make money more than that each month. But when they couldn't pay me the money I needed to be paid, then now I wasn't making the money that I needed to be able to take care of all those bills, keep everything running, and I wasn't going to drop my business. I put too much time into it. So I had to find something else that would pay me what I needed to keep this up and running so nobody would miss a beat, only me. And so I sacrificed what I loved doing for what other people had going on because I didn't want to let them down.
Yeah.
And so I went out there and I did. I ended up going and doing pro wrestling. Once I did it, I loved it. Obviously, it was great. Got a great contract and it had a great career. But what those guys don't understand and what the fans didn't understand at the time was that I was the one that sacrificed because I walked away from something that I loved doing because I couldn't take care of the other people that were doing what they were loved doing.
Right. Yeah. From the outside, well, fans never know what's going on, do they?
Yeah, I mean, I fought with that too, with the fans turning on me, and then even my fighters turning on me because I didn't tell them, any of my problems. Those were my problems. But it was funny when these guys were leaving, and even my own brother. They all turned on me because they said I walked away, but they realized they wouldn't be where they're at right now. Frank wouldn't have the career that he had right now if it wasn't for the fact that I kept that all open for those guys to continue to keep training and keep following their dreams.
Well, that's an old school mentality, isn't it? I've had a lot of sportsmen on where we talk about like mental health and things like that, and they're saying back in the day you didn't talk about like I've got these problems going on. You just didn't share it, did you? You harbored it all in, and you just got on with it. So obviously these days you could have come out and said I'm going to have to do it, otherwise you're not going to have somewhere to train. But in them days it's probably a bit different, isn't it? You've just got to get on with it, like an old school mentality.
Well, I mean, for me, it was more about an obligation, a commitment that I made. And, those guys signed a contract with me when they came into the fighter's house, and I signed it, and I had a commitment to them. And then when I had these at-risk kids, that when they came into that home, I made a commitment to them too, that I would help them change their lives and be able to get back on the right path. And, and I had a contract with the buildings. I couldn't just walk away from them. I had a contract. And of course I had a family and I had kids and I don't need a contract for that. I got married, and I had a responsibility. So these are all things that went through my head when I said, you know what, I'm going to have to leave something I love doing and do something that I may not like, but at least I'll be able to keep my obligations and my promises alive. And that was the only thing that mattered, was that I was able to keep my reputation and my word. And that's what mattered to me.
How tough was it transitioning to the WWF at the time? Because you obviously used to going in the ring to hurt people, and then to go in to sort of have it a bit different. Was there times at the start where you maybe caught an elbow or a hand, you thought, oh God, I nearly lost it then, or were you just ultimate professional?
No, I went in professionally. I mean, I did wrestling first. I started out in pro wrestling, but it had been a long time, and they gave me a guy named Van Vader for one of my first matches, and he had done some mixed martial arts over in Japan, the shoot fighting wrestling. So Vince put him with me, knowing that if I got stiff with them, that Van Vader would be fine. I mean, he's a gamer, right? He's a tough guy, and so when they put me with him, I broke his nose because I threw a knee. And it wasn't on purpose, but it just happened. But we were stiff with one another because, at least to me, I felt normal, right? It just felt right. And I was very, very happy that I had him, because if it would have been anybody else, they wouldn't have made it through the match, because I probably would have put them on the ground and they probably would have walked away or something, or did something, because I wasn't doing it on purpose, but I didn't have an understanding of what it was, right? And I was trying to still find that wrestling thing I did early on. And so by having Van Vader, it gave me an opportunity to go ahead and have that match, and then understand where I needed to be in order to compete in the WWF. And so I was very fortunate to have somebody like Vader in there with me to be able to do my first match. So, yeah, God bless him. I know he's in heaven right now, but he was a tremendous opponent, and I couldn't have asked for a better guy to open my career with in the WWF.
And with the crowds and things like that, because MMA at the time wasn't as big as the WWF, was it amazing being in some of them stadiums with 80,000, 60,000 people? And was that? Did you take a bit to acclimatise that, or was it just exciting?
Well, you got to remember, when I was in Japan, I was in front of 90, almost 90,000 people, close to 100,000 people in the dome. So I was used to it. I knew what it was like. I was always the main event most of the time. And so I knew the crowds were huge in Japan because their TV and pay-per-view just aren't there. Yeah. So I understood what it was like to be in front of crowds. Obviously not as electric, because Japanese fans were different when they cheer. They're not all crazy like the US is. But so I did have kind of a feeling for what it was like to be in front of a bunch of people. And but it was different. I remember the Canadian Stampede was the Americans against the Canadians. You want to talk about a loud audience, man. That was just, I've been in front of a couple of them with WWF, and your skin vibrates when they're getting so loud. And it puts you in a different atmosphere when you're out there trying to entertain people. You want to go an extra mile for them.
Well, I can remember when I was younger, you had a massive fight with The Rock. I can remember that was huge when we were kids, like, oh, you're going to have to watch this. It's going to be unreal. And I can remember that was loud again, wasn't it? Like, people were going crazy for that match.
Yeah, that was another huge match. Like I said, I've been very fortunate to be in there with a lot of top guys and a lot of great crowds, great fans. And Rock was right at the top of that, just electrifying. And so for the matches I had with The Rock were, I've said it before, they're some of my best memories. And I've got a lot of them there with Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, Stone Cold, The Undertaker. I could go on. Those are definitely ones. My career there was memorable, and very fortunate to have that. So, but The Rock, like I said, there's some special moments there.
Well, it's weird because I've watched a few podcasts and interviews with wrestlers from that era, and there's certain people everyone likes. You, The Undertaker, and The Rock. It's always like, oh yeah, Ken was great. The Undertaker was like the general of the change room, things like that. Was there much bitchiness in the change rooms, or did you just not notice because you were just getting on with your job?
No, I think the attitude there was a great time. Wow, it was a lot of talent there, and everybody was happy because everybody was, even if you were opening the card up, you were part of a story that mattered. It wasn't like you're just another guy on the card and you're going to open it up for the main event. Man, every match counted, and so it was a fun time because everybody was relevant. So it was really fun, and it wasn't. I hate to bring it up, but because it's a bad memory. But it wasn't really, to me, it wasn't really bad until the screw job with
Oh, the
Bret
Montreal
Hart.
one. Ah, yeah.
Yeah, because then is when the Canadians and the Americans, and there was so much tension and heat and anticipation with what was going to happen next in the story. And it was a great time. And then something happened, I don't even know the whole story yet, and I don't want to know it because that means you have to go back and retrace everything, and it's just a bad memory. But it just felt like this story had just turned dark, and it started probably, I don't know, a month or two prior to the screw job. You just felt things. Bret was pissed off all the time. Sean was, antagonizing and being Sean. Sean is a very, very talented guy and very charismatic, good and bad.
Yeah.
And you could see the tension between the two. You could feel it through everyone. And then people started taking sides, and it got ugly. It got dark. And then the screw job happened, and I just felt to myself, it could have been handled differently, because now the wrestling is all about trust. I mean, it's all about trust. You're getting in the ring with people and you're working, and it's a dance. It's still risky. You're still hurting one. You're still hurting and slamming and punching and doing all these things that still hurt. But the intentions aren't going to be trying to hurt somebody, even though everything you're doing is risky. So you trust people, right? And so once I got into the business, that's what I was told. You got to rely on your partner, and you have to trust them. And that's what I was sold going into the pro wrestling, WWF. And then when I seen this happen, I thought, okay, Sean did that. That was wrong. And then I found out that, it came from the top. And if it was just Sean, let those two guys settle it, because I like both of them. I do.
Yeah.
Brad is my guy, right? Brad is my guy. But I thought I respect Sean because of his ability and his talent. There's no question. But when it came from the top, and all of a sudden, all that the fantasy had just turned out to be a bad guy. Everything that you were relying on and thinking was it isn't, because you got the guy at the top basically going in and swerving and lying and cheating somebody out of a finish because they won't do something that you want them to do. Instead of just firing them and stripping them of the belt, it went that way. And so it just, I think more than anything, man, it hurt. And then all of a sudden now I'm afraid of because I was Bret's guy, and I worked with Bret, and that he was going to work an angle with me and drop the strap to me. At least I thought, because he came to me and said that he would drop it to me, and all this was supposed to be happening. And all of a sudden now I'm in the crosshairs of what happened to Bret and his family. And now I'm in the crosshairs because I'm a part of that. What's going to happen with me, And so then this stuff starts creeping into your head. Even though it may not be true, and it's probably not, but you're still going, is something going to happen with me? And I'm a badass, right? So how far are they going to go with me? Like, what are they going to do? I mean, I'll get up and start kicking people's ass. So what are they going to do with me? I mean, is it going to be physical? You know, they're going to drop a trash can on me. You know, I don't know. Like I said, these are things that were going through my head, and it was one of those times where it was just, you know, it was bad.
Is that when you maybe started thinking about going back to MMA? Was that when it started clicking, thinking, I wouldn't mind a change from this? This is getting old. I can't trust people around us. Is that maybe when you started thinking, I could maybe get back into MMA, still young enough, still fit enough?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And again, there's a lot of stuff going on at that time. You know, I was having problems at home, you know, with the family. I was always gone, you know, missing my kids' birthdays and their football games. And there's a lot of stuff going on. And yet I was making those sacrifices because I knew what I had to do to keep everything going. And then that happened. And now that you're like, you know, what's my future look like? You know, and you think about what happened to Owen, you know, where he came off the rafters, and, you know, how does that happen? You know, he didn't have, he was using, from my understanding, he was using a professional harness where the button was up front instead of in the back, where normally it would be where someone would release you. And he accidentally hit that button and he went down. So, I mean, you know, it was a position he was put into that I'm not sure he was ready for. So, you know, just a lot of stuff, right? And as a person, right, wrong, or indifferent, whether people one side or the other side get mad or not, but you got to understand where I was at the time and the thoughts in my head and what was going through my head. And, you know, so, you know, I you know, right, wrong, or indifferent, I had to think of what I was going to do and where I needed to go.
And that back to MMA and things like that. And if you go back to the wrestling, a lad I go to the gym with, he's actually a coach at the WWE now, Johnny Moss. He's in England at the minute because he can't go back for COVID. And he said they always bring legends back, and he never understood how you haven't been back yet. One of the biggest names. He just said, if you get a chance, ask Ken why he's never been back for a Legends match.
You know, I don't know. I really don't know. You're gonna have to ask them. I've asked that myself. I know I've reached out a couple times for certain things when they brought back the attitude thing, but never a response. So, you know, I don't know. I really don't know.
Right, yeah, because he was saying, he said, out of all the names, one of the biggest names ever. He just always thinks, I'm surprised Ken hasn't been. But I said I would ask that. And then you went back to MMA. We'd been away for so long. Was it tough going back? Because like any sport, you lose your rhythm, you lose your time, and to have so many years out, did you think it was going to be easy when you went back, or did it take a bit to transition?
No, I knew it would be difficult. I knew it was an uphill battle. You know, remember when I ended up leaving the first time, I had already had issues with my knee, and I was struggling with takedowns already and moving on the ground already. So going back to it after going through this rigorous tour, 2.5 years of WWF, which wasn't easy. I took a lot of abuse to get back into it. You know, I had my first fight and I won it, and so it was. I knew going in and started training back, I knew that I wasn't where I was, because the guys that I was rolling with were some of my own guys, and I was struggling with them, you know, with my own team, and I was used to being able to dominate. So I knew going in that I wasn't the same guy. But here's the thing: I still enjoyed it. It wasn't. Yeah. It wasn't work to me. It wasn't something I was afraid of. It was like I still enjoyed it.
Well, the thing that you set up now with the bare, well, I haven't set it up, but you're involved with the bare knuckle now. Is that's another sport? It's a bit like you set off with the UFC at the very start, and that got big. Do you feel like that's going to happen with the bare knuckle stuff?
Yes, I do. I've been involved with a lot of different transitions when it comes to the combat sports. You know, when it first started, it was no holds barred.
Yeah,
I loved it, man. It was just so pure. And then, of course, they sold the gloves, as you know. Everybody bought into it as it being safer. But if you fight long enough, you realize I don't want to get hit with a glove where your hand's taped underneath. I want to get hit with a bare knuckle because at least I know if you hit me with a bare knuckle and you don't hit the soft spot, I know you hurt your hand as opposed to a glove where if you hit something that's hard, I know you didn't hurt your hand, but it still hurt me. So there's a big difference. And the submissions are different. You know, when you talk about the glove trying to choke somebody, it's very difficult to slide the hand in there and get a choke on somebody when you're trying for a rear naked choke or even a front choke. Darce chokes, all those are difficult with that big glove on there. And then when you talk about the striking, the accuracy of striking is it doesn't have to be there. You can hit them anywhere and still drop them. But without the glove on, you know, if somebody catches your back, 90% of the time you're going to get choked. You're going out with anything, and even submissions with the legs, with the heel hooks and stuff like that. That glove is so big you can't catch the heel, and so it takes away all that. Really, the real special guys that are really good at submissions takes away their opportunity to finish guys with submissions because of that glove. Same with strikers. You know, you get guys that throw big punches that aren't accurate. They get rewarded because they don't have to be accurate, as opposed to guys who may be big punches but they're very accurate. They don't get rewarded for being accurate because the guys that are knocking people out not being accurate are getting rewarded also. So it just takes away that purity of real fighters, guys that are pure fighters. And so that's why I think bringing back bare knuckle, it's bringing it back the purity of fighting and not sloppy fighting and guys that can get away with not being professional. So I think it'll just be a matter of time before we see the change in that. And when people talk about the safety part, well, bare knuckles too dangerous. No, it's not. The reality of it is, yeah, it looks worse because there's more blood, there's more broken bones, there's more cuts. But as far as brain damage, do you think when you have a brain that's setting in water, in fluid in your head, if I was to hit you with a pillow 10 times, bam, bam, and you didn't block it, you stood there. If I hit you with a fist 10 times, which one is going to be worse when it comes to that brain inside? It's the same, even though the damage on the outside is going to be much worse. But on the inside, it's fluid. So if your head's being hit, okay, that brain is bouncing off in there 100 times. So if I hit you with a pillow 20 times and I hit you with my hand 5 times, the one where it's bouncing off inside 20 times is much worse than the 5 times. Other than the knuckle, though, 5 times you probably only need 1 or 2 to knock them out. So it's the amount of times, because that's why you see these boxers who have spent years of boxing, they can't talk.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because everyone said about MMA when that first came out, saying the gloves are too little. Whereas boxing, bigger gloves, there's a lot more problems in later ages. Some of them can't string a sentence together, they're punch drunk. And that was always the argument there. And I totally get it about the bare knuckle as well, because that's taking even any gloves off.
Bare knuckle is there's less punches. You're not throwing as many punches in bare knuckle, which in return means your brain is not taking as much damage.
How tough is it for someone like you, who's such a competitor, keeps yourself obviously really fit, not to make a return? Because you must just wake up some days and think, I tell you what, I'm going to do bare knuckle, I'm going to do MMA. Is it hard for you each morning to say, Ken, don't do that today, just try and live a normal life? Or do you battle with that each day?
No, actually, it's worse when I'm there at an event. I get that blood going. But, it's like this. I'm not going to ever say I'm done. It's just not, that's not in me. But the reality of it is I'm probably not going to, I mean, obviously I'm a fighter. If somebody comes up to me and says something to me, I'm going to fight them. That's just me. If I'm challenged, that's who I am. And it would no different if somebody was coming up to me in a fight and would say something to me, Hoist Gracie or something like that. Yeah, absolutely. I would fight them. That's what I am.
Well, that's what I mean. Fighters fight, don't they? Mike Tyson's coming out of retirement to have a fight with Roy Jones. I seen you on his podcast, and people say, no, he shouldn't do it. And you think, that's just what he's done since the age of I don't know when. That's just what he is. So he's a fighter. He can make money at it. Why not?
I don't understand. People always say, well, I lost a lot of fans because I fought too long. I'm like, fans should be happy for me. If you're really a fan of mine, you should be happy for me that I was able to fight as long as I did. because I'm doing something I love doing. It's not a chore. It's not a job. It's like you going fishing or hunting or camping or skiing or whatever it is that you do that makes you happy. That's what made me happy. So people are saying I lost fans because I was doing something that made me happy? What?
No, it's well, that's the saying in life, isn't it? Do what makes you happy. So if you enjoy fighting, if you like fishing, things like that, that's what you should be doing. And
dude, if I'm gonna make $500,000 or $300,000 to go do a fight, and out of my prime, I'm not going to do it, doing something I love to do and get paid for it? Are you serious? Because a few fans are going to say, well, he's too old, you shouldn't do it. Come on, people. Really?
Well, it's for 300,000, I'd fight my grandma. That's what I do for 300,000, and I'm not trading.
I don't get it. I got so much heat for fighting. Even today where people say, well, you lost a lot of fans because he fought too long. I'm like, I would fight now if somebody came and offered me $300,000 or $500,000 to get in a fight, even at my age, because it's fun and I'm getting paid to do it. Duh.
Yeah. But anyways, Ken, cheers for your time. Fantastic to get you on, an absolute legend. Grown up idol when we were growing up. So brilliant. Thanks for coming on.
Listen, I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Cheers, Ken.